more, Commissioner. I'll do this quickly. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to Kent County Levy Court Committee meeting held at 55 Bay Road, Dover, Delaware. It's Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. And before we get started with the committee meetings, I'll let the county administrator read the rules for the people on the WebEx, people on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. President. It appears we have no current visitors on WebEx. We will, for the record, state that this meeting is being offered in virtual format as well as in person, and we do offer WebEx connection to the meeting. For those who may join us via WebEx, this is a committee meeting, and during the meeting there may be opportunities for public comment. We will prompt you at the appropriate time if you are joining us virtually on how to join the meeting by pressing *3 on your computer, which would be to raise your electronic hand, or *6 on your mobile device to unmute yourself. We'll prompt visitors, if we have any, as the meeting progresses to that effect. And as an official proceeding of Levy Court, the Mason's Rules of Order are in effect, along with the Levy Court adopted Rules of Procedure for committee meetings. Mr. President, turn the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have 7 commissioners present and the county administrator. The first item on the agenda is Planning Services Committee. Mr. Buxton, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
I can believe Ms. Kiefer's headed our way. She'll explain what we're looking at.
Good evening, Commissioners. You may recall that in October of last year, Levy Court entered into a contract with First State Inspection Services to augment inspections and plan review for the department. Part of that motion allowed for that contract to be extended for up to 2 fiscal years. And in the FY22 budget, the Levy Court just adopted $100,000 was allocated for contractual services. So what I would request you consider tonight is indeed extending the contract with First State not to exceed, for the next fiscal year, not to exceed that $100,000. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thanks, Commissioner Buxton. So, Ms. Kiefer, how many times have we used First State in the last 6 months?
I couldn't tell you times. I can tell you it goes in fits and spurts. We've spent on First State from November to January just under $28,000. And then for April, we just got an invoice for just over $1,400. What the past year has shown us with the building industry is it's completely unpredictable. For all of the permits we issued, construction has slowed down because materials aren't available, so demand for inspections is slower.
Or they're too expensive to buy
There's
right
that
now.
as well.
So 29,400, so about $30,000. What was the amount that we set aside as the maximum back in, was it March we did this?
October, and it was, I believe, 55,000, between 50 and 55,000.
So we haven't come close to that.
Not yet, no.
So what are you asking for tonight? How much?
I'm not asking for anything. The
Not
levy
asking
court
for anything.
allocated $100,000 for contractual services.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Sometimes I like to know the answer before I ask the question, but not tonight. It is what it is. I received a letter, I think maybe some of you did, I'm not sure. It was from a contractor who was speaking on behalf of many contractors, at least that was his words, who had had a conversation with some of the staff in your office, who had articulated to him rather clearly in the letter, his words, not mine, that I&E, and by default, the planning department is understaffed and underfunded. Is that your position?
I don't believe the staff actually told him that. I understand that's what he said in the email. My position remains the same as it was when we did the budget hearings, that it would be very helpful to have the building inspector position funded so we have additional help in the office as well as able to send out in the field, and a smaller contract with First State to help when we have a surge or we have holidays or vacations. But Levy Court made the decision it made.
So, overtime, is your staff capable of, or have they been offered overtime?
Yes,
In the
oh,
last month.
absolutely, they have been.
Have they accessed overtime in the last month?
Yes,
Right, significantly, enough that we probably shouldn't have any kind of a backlog, correct?
well, we don't have a backlog
Fair enough.
in plan review or building inspections.
Do we have a problem answering the phone, and is there the possibility that individuals within your department can be assigned that role while we still effectively maintain a zero backlog because we have this contract and we have overtime? Can we identify if in fact what the letter said was accurate and what we can do about it?
I think the first question is determine the extent of accuracy in the letter. We already have a staff person assigned to the phone, and then to figure out how we have to augment that.
Because my take, and it's in a public forum, is that I think the impression is clear and obvious that that is what is being presented. And it's being presented by the department head, at least by impression. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, the department feels the perception that they are underfunded and understaffed, and they're articulating that to community members. Or community members are articulating it to me, or to you if you want the letter, or to the General Assembly. And I don't agree with it.
That
And so-
position was not articulated by our staff to the constituent in question.
So what we're getting at, $1,400 in allocated funds for the month of April.
We spent $1,400 in the month of April.
I forget the number, the previous 2 years, 3 years, or 3 months, was it 20-some thousand?
Just under 28,000 from November to January.
So we had this fall off of utilizing it, let's say in April, at least to the
Right.
extent that we had before. So if we do have a phone call problem, there are others in this that can answer the call, not just one person, correct? So if we have a phone call problem, and it might require to pull somebody to make sure that we don't have a phone call problem, it shouldn't be an issue because we have this contract and we have overtime allocated.
The contract doesn't address needs in the office.
That's not what I said. It addresses needs outside the office. So
It
if we
does.
need to address the needs in the office, you can pull people to address the needs.
And we have been.
You can
We have
assign people that
in.
are sitting there doing their job to also effectively answer a call.
And they
do it
do.
all the time.
And we have kept a building inspector in. We've been able to.
Or other. Does it have to be a building inspector? Can we have someone else in the office assist in at least answering the call, identifying where that assistance could go? Because my understanding is that we're getting calls that are now going that are permeating the entire county trying to get action in your department.
I think we need to assess the extent of that and then fix it.
I agree with that statement. Thank you. Sure.
Sarah, how many employees are in planning?
The entire department?
Yeah.
Just under 30, I think.
How many are working in the office 5 days a week at any one time, average?
15, 20?
So half are in the office right now, the other half are working from home or on vacation or sick or...
Well, no, I mean, there's also field staff, right?
Field staff, right.
We've got 8, 9, 10 to 12 who spend time in the field.
Spend some time in the field, but can
Some
they
do-
answer the phone? So the phone system is robust enough to be able to rotate calls so that if it rings on your desk and you don't answer, it rings on somebody else's desk and goes around the loop
Yeah.
until someone picks it up. Because what I don't want to hear is that any calls that come into any department here in the county are going to voicemail. Somebody needs to pick up that phone. So is that something that we can accomplish fairly quickly?
We need to address, we've got some number of people working from home for medical reasons. One of whom is in I&E. We need to address that.
And will that fix the problem of calls coming into your department that go to voicemail? What I'm trying to get at is, I don't want to assign the tasks of permit inspection and, plan review to an outside company when we have people that can do it inside, but they don't seem to be doing it inside because they're on that, now I'm working from home. Well, if you're working from home, then you should be able to do this because that's the technology that we set up for them to be able to do this.
Throughout the department, there are 3 people working remotely. 2 of whom are in I&E. One does plan review. The other one is a secretary and has been handling the vast majority of calls.
And that's remotely.
It is remote.
And when that person doesn't answer the phone remotely, what happens? It goes to their voicemail?
That goes to voicemail, and part of it is, and the county administrator and I actually discussed this today, the technology is not set up for her to be able to roll the phone. Everything's forwarded to a cell phone.
Right. And that's an employee, is that one of the employees we need to address to bring them back into the office?
If we can bring them back in, I don't want to get into medical details in a public meeting. If we can bring them back in, we will. If we can't, we will look at other alternatives and bring someone else in.
Do you ever get any metrics from the employees who are working from home for what they're accomplishing? So you do have metrics of that they are getting something done?
Weekly, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Any other comments or questions before we move this on? None? The proposal before you, we are in agreement to move forward on this? Show of hands? Okay, that's 7-0. Thank you. Any public comments? Seeing none? Ben?
We do have one visitor on WebEx, and we'll offer opportunity to provide comment if they wish to on this item. And press star 3 on your computer, if you're using a computer, to raise your electronic hand, star 6 to unmute yourself. Doesn't appear that they wish to speak on this item. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so you adjourn your committee? All right, next item on the agenda, Public Works Committee, Mr. Howell, Chair.
Ms. Gold, come forward and tell us all about replacement pumps. At Pump Station 3 at Water Street in Dover, we have three 300 horsepower pumps. Currently, 2 are working, 1 had a problem, and it has taken us a while to get to the point where we now understand that that pump cannot be repaired. So we're looking to buy a replacement pump. We looked at some other manufacturers' options. The original pump is no longer available. That manufacturer has a 335 horsepower pump that fits the design requirements and the footprint. When we explored the other options either didn't fit the physical requirements, and because of that were more costly because we were going to have to reconfigure the slot for putting in the pump. So we're looking to buy a 335 horsepower Wheelo pump with a quote of $135,718. And we believe that's the best fit for this application, and there is funding of $175,000 in the budget for FY21 sewer fund capital projects. Back to you.
All right, understood. So we do have the money available, and it's just a matter of time. I know we had some difficulty down there. We won't get into all the details, but any questions, comments from anybody? Let's go on the consent agenda if everybody votes in favor, or at least 4 of you. Got 7? Very good. Thank you. Are there any comments on the air elsewhere?
If any caller on WebEx wishes to address this matter, *3 on your computer, *6 on your mobile device will bring you into the room.
Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Next item on agenda, Finance Committee, Ms. Maston.
Yes, we have one item this evening, and that's to propose grants to law enforcement agencies, which would cover state, municipal, and Capitol Police. And this item is coming from our leadership group. So with that, I'll turn it over to President Pepper for more input.
Thank you, Ms. Maston. Actually, before President Banta left, we had some inquiries from local police departments to see if we were ever going to do these local grants to local police departments again. And one in particular, the city of Dover, they're looking to to buy 5 police dogs. And the amount for 5 police dogs fully equipped comes to a little over $100,000. So that brought it to mine and Commissioner Banna's attention, and then once the new year rolled over, Commissioner Angel and myself looked at it, and it's been since 2014 since we actually did a police agency grant. And at that time, we did $250,000 total grant allocation, $75,000 of which went to the Delaware State Police, and the remainder, $175,000, was divided amongst the police departments for the amount of time that they left their jurisdiction to back up the Delaware State Police. And I just handed out the formula that was done for 2014, and you can see how much the police departments received back then. So if this was approved and we did this grant again, of course, the city of Dover would be able to use it towards their purchasing dogs, and town of Viola Police Department would be able to use it for funding their police agency, startup police agency. So we wanted to bring it to your attention that we haven't done this in 7 years, and I think that this would be a good way to show that we support law enforcement. As you know, Newcastle County has their own county police department, which is majority of their county budget. Sussex County, they contribute, I think it's like $3 million a year towards additional Delaware State troopers to patrol to Sussex County. And I think it would be good faith on our part if we did these grants. And obviously, we don't have the budgets that they have, nor do we want the budgets that they have. And so I think 7 years has passed, and I think we should consider $300,000, take $100,000 of it and give it to the Delaware State Police, because back in 2014, we only had one state police troop for the entire county of Kent County. Now it's divided between Troop 3 and Troop 9, which is in Odessa. So if each one of them wanted to do a program or purchase some type of equipment for that $50,000 each, they'd be able to do that. And the remainder, $200,000, would be divided up the same way we did in 2014. And if we decide to do this, I'll get the numbers from the state police as to how many times each municipality left their jurisdiction to assist the state police, and we would have metrics to go by to figure out how much each department gets. So, any comments? Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the past, just to give you the ideas of what took place in 2014 was the state police used it for their horses, the equestrine, and then the motorcycles got radars. Some of the police bought body armor, and I think this time they're going to be looking at use it for cameras, more body armor, dogs, training. So, and like you said, this has been 7 years, and because it's been a lot longer further than the last one we did, President Pepper and myself, we thought 300,000, bump it up 50,000, because the world is definitely changing, and now is the time that they could really use the extra funds for the assistance they have already helped our constituents. So I definitely would like to see this passed. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? Commissioner Buxton?
Without articulating too much, the state police, who doesn't want to be liked by them, who wants to stand here tonight and question this? I guess I do. I'm not opposed to assisting the police. In fact, I voted the last time. I'll vote for this one again. I just wish that we would consider the fact that we just adopted a budget with a significant amount of spending over and above revenue. It's upside down. That's nobody's fault. It is what it is, right? If we've just done that, and then we recognize that we have funding coming to this that's in the form of this federal stimulus, why not? Why not wait a month and see how much we really can do for the state police and the local jurisdictions? Using the money that's getting ready to be allocated to us, because $300,000 of general fund money, that's a lot of money that we can do a lot of good for, that's not restricted to certain things. I don't think it's an unfair ask. I'm not saying no to the $300,000. I'm not saying no to the spending. I am saying slow down for a second. Let's wait a month. Let's get a decision from the federal government that says, what can we utilize these funds for that can help the jurisdictions of the state police, the local municipalities? And guess what? If we can do it better using that funds, we didn't ask for those funds. They're coming to us. So if they're coming to us, let's make good use of them. We might be able to utilize those funds to do exactly this, even at a grander scale. And then keep that $300,000 that's not restricted to anything else to help plug the gap for the current budget we just adopted. That's it. It's what I'm asking for. I get it if you don't. It is what it is.
Mr. Pettermage, where would be the likely sources for these funds?
Thank you, President Pepper. Well, the recommended motion offers that the source of funding would be the current year FY21 contingency, which has ample funding in it. In the other two previously referenced times where a grant like this was offered in 2007, 2014, it utilized unrestricted fund balance or savings or reserves. That's where we're at. With the either of those sources would be available for this.
The RTT funds wouldn't be available?
Well, the RTT is, as you know, almost all of that is currently being used for our own public safety purposes. So some of the prior year fund balance money that's unrestricted may consist of RTT money, but we're not making RTT money in abundance to where we have a surplus of it moving forward.
Does anyone else wish to add any comments?
Commissioner Masson.
Commissioner
Yeah, but not in a negative way. Yeah, but yeah.
Commissioner Buxton?
Yeah, and it's not, what I wanted to articulate better is, remember I stated that, and we have, in this recent budget that we just adopted, we have a deficit that we had to bridge. Now the goal, the hope is that we bring in revenue that overcomes that deficit. One of the ways you do that is you have carryover funds from this year's budget, this one that we're still in, that helps to plug that hole. Spending down a contingency hurts that ability and increases the likelihood that you remain at a deficit at the end, the budget cycle. That's really all I'm asking for is just a month's of consideration. We can do this. Let's wait a month to see maybe if we can do it even at a grander scale in a month's time, utilizing federal government's funds, because that is what it is. They asked us to spend it. That's all. I'm done. I won't hold you up anymore. My apologies.
Any other comments? Commissioner Sweeney?
Thanks, Commissioner Masson. I would just request that if we do pass this, that I have the opportunity to hand the checks over to the police agencies in my district. That's all. Not to mail them. No, that's what I want.
That's a noble gesture.
If this passes.
You can hand out mine, okay? Because
Commissioner
this
Howe?
should not be a political gesture at all.
Oh, it's not.
Commissioner Howell?
Good one, Jody. If we went ahead and appropriated this money and spent it, could we then replenish it with the relief money?
Is that directed to me?
To anybody?
Okay. We answer. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Howell. We do not have guidance yet from the U.S. Treasury on what the rescue fund money can be utilized for. We do know that the bill that was passed has basically 4 areas where it can be utilized. It's very clear. And the first one is to help provide relief where there was economic stress created by the pandemic. And that can come in many forms. I had a conversation with some of you previously about this particular grant. Based on what I know today about the rescue fund, I don't think that if you read what it was purposed for, this would not qualify, because this is more like a grant with no specific direction to offset an impact from the pandemic. This is, I heard, to buy, equipment, things like that that are needed in law enforcement, but those needs probably existed prior to the pandemic. So I'm not sure, and without the guidance from the U.S. Treasury, it's hard to say for certain if something like this would be covered, but just based on the pure reading of that very lengthy act, I would say that it probably is not anticipated that this kind of thing will be covered by that kind of funding.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, let me ask you, is there any hurry to do this? I mean, do we have to do this, pass this tonight? I mean, is there a deadline, or, I mean, we're strictly calling the shots on this? because if it turns out that we could replenish this money, okay, as the rules come down, I don't know what's taking them so long, but that would be a better move, but I don't know. I'd prefer to hold off on this, frankly. One month's fine.
Well, it seems to me that that'd be like buying somebody a birthday gift with somebody else's money and saying it's from you. So, I mean, you know, that money is coming from the federal government to address certain issues. We have a history of at least twice in the past taking county funds and supporting our local police and our state police. It's been 7 years since we did that. And, you know, if we wait till we get the federal funds and we use those funds to support the police, well, that'd be nice that it allows it. But if it, you know, even if it does allow it, it still would not be the county giving them anything. It would be the federal government giving them money. So, and no, there's no big hurry on this, other than time slips away, and we just finished a budget. We know what's available there, and every year for the past 10 or 12 years, we've operated on a deficit, but it always made it back by the end of the year. Isn't that right?
Yeah, if I could just address the terminology. Deficit implies that you're spending money you do not have, okay? And usually that's when we hear it talked in terms of the federal budget, it's because the federal government is borrowing money to make their payments or to cover their costs. This county is not doing that. So it's really not deficit spending or anything like that. I think we need to dispel that. What it is every year, and for the past 15 years that I've been involved with this, every single year we had to balance the budget because your expenses and your revenues have to balance in your budget plan. And the budget is a plan, not something you've already spent. And in order to do that, we forecast what revenues are, and we usually go on the conservative side there. And then the expenses add up, and you total everything that you know you're not going to spend out, but it's everything that we've anticipate potentially being an expense for the year. And if there's a difference, you pull the balance, you commit a portion of your savings to make it balance. We've done that for 15 years straight. Some years were bigger than this year by a significant amount, just so you know. But we've also been very good at the end of the year, posting revenue over expenses. That means we have money left over to put back into the bank. So, and that's been our history. So just want to make sure that no one leaves this room thinking we're deficit spending, because we really are not deficit spending.
So we're making our money that we have in savings work for us throughout the year, and by the end of the year, that money is replaced with funds come in during the year.
Yeah, and it's again, it's a balancing act between your expense budget, and the budget is a plan, not a bill. The budget is a plan, and in any given year, we just do not spend the entire budget. We never do. Just not our history.
I ask for consensus to move this forward.
Ms. Maston, if you don't mind.
Commissioner Buxton?
Not an expert. Do enjoy the time. We're having a nice discussion, right? I don't know how I implied it, other than to say this. When you use your savings account to cover your household account, you have to replenish the savings or your deficit spending, right? I mean, at least that's the way I judge it, right? And so the idea is what I said before. That's what I tried to articulate. That right now, we have a lot to pay back to our savings account in order to make this happen. Now, yes, we've had a bigger one in the past. You know, the gym year was an example, but that's way different than this year's budget. So the only reason I articulated it was to say just that. Let's wait a month and see what we can do with the funding. I want to remind folks of this. A Kent County taxpayer dollar or a federal government taxpayer dollar is still taxpayer money. We ought to use it wisely. I mean, the federal government's money, it looks like fake money, and it is, but it's still going to be paid back by the taxpayer eventually in some form or fashion. So anyway, I lied when I said I was done. Hopefully that's not offensive, right? We're just having a talk, right? It is what it is. I think I'm going to look pretty bad when this thing ends anyway, so at least, you know, in that fashion, you guys are going to get your, get your cake, because I'm going to look really bad on this one.
Hal.
Mr. President, you used buying a birthday cake as an analogy. You knew that my birthday's this month.
I'll see if I can borrow some money to buy you a gift.
Good
Okay,
enough,
folks.
for the record.
Going once, going twice, sold. Do we have consensus?
No, Commissioner,
Vice President Angel?
Thank you, Commissioner Masson. Well, the reason this is sensitive, because right now we have to pass it so that we can get the numbers from the police. We don't want to delay that part. So it's crucial that if we're going to be doing this, that one, we have the money set aside, and then we get the numbers from the police department so that the checks can be cut. That's first of all. That's what I wanted to tell Mr. Howe. According to what Commissioner Sweeney was saying, in the last one, we had the Delaware State Police come here where we awarded the check to them as a body because they are on the whole state. Now, as far as giving checks to individuals, police departments, I know Commissioner Pepper and myself did City of Dover because at the time Commissioner Eby wasn't available, and I did Cheswolt, but we can all piggyback off this. It's not for political purposes. It's not for us to just get our names in the paper. It's something to show that we are, as a Levy Court body, which represents our county, can do something positive for the people that we serve. And this is, I think, a positive way of doing it. And it's been 7 years. So that's the best way I can put it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner, or President Pepper?
thank you. You know, I think doing something like this is a positive thing, and I think our constituents would be happy that we're spending money on something that they can see. You just look around City of Dover, all the shootings in and around the City of Dover, shootings out with the county, the major traffic accidents where people are killed. I think if the Kent County constituents know that we're supporting the police and we're doing something to not only support the police, but to protect the citizens by doing something like this minor for a county that does nothing other than this to support the police within the county.
President Pepper, I agree with that, especially after what's happened in Smyrna in the last couple of weeks. We've lost 5 lives due to domestic issues. So, and I think the people of the county would be very proud to know that we're giving back to these police officers to help support them when funds are low at a town level. With that, can I ask for consensus to move this forward to the consent agenda for next week? 6 and 0. Thank you.
Sorry, for clarification, would that be on consent agenda or under new business?
Yeah, consent agenda.
Put it under consent agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any public comment?
If we have any followers on the WebEx that wish to address this matter, press star 3 on your computer, or star 6 on your mobile device. We can bring you into the room.
Again, for those joining by device, you can find your raise hand or unmute icon next to your image in the gallery, or by pressing the participants buttons at the bottom of your screen.
Commissioner Maston, it doesn't appear that anyone from WebEx wishes to address the matter.
Back to you, President Pepper.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Next items on the agenda, an administration committee, Mr. Angel, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Pettimaj, Mr. Coelho.
Thank you, Commissioner Angel. Recently, the commissioners, a couple of commissioners, asked staff to develop a policy on remote work telecommuting, launch from home. As we endeavored to do so, we sought out a number of resources, and in particular, the state of Delaware's remote work policy, and some guidance that the county had developed during the onset of the pandemic. As a result, it has evolved into the document that was included in your packet. In particular, the policy will establish 3 types of telework: the routine work, which I think most folks are fairly familiar with, which would require that the employee report to the work site at least a couple times a week; a situational, which can be based on a case-by-case basis, especially as it relates to health; and management telework. We wrote it specifically to also address launch from home. With the advent of the MGO software and capability, there was interest in being able to allow the building codes inspectors to leave from their homes if they have their work assignments, which they should be able to, and go directly to the work site without having to drive into the county administration building each morning, unless necessary, of course. It lays out the various responsibilities for the employee and the equipment, and we, as we do now, will utilize a number of forms, not only to secure approvals and authorization, but to make the employer responsible and for equipment, and to ensure that they have the capability of being able to efficiently and effectively work from home. And also, we tried to address complaints and concerns and how that may be addressed as well. So I'll go put it back to you, Chairman Angel.
Thank you, Mr. Coelho. Well, before I open it up, I just want to say that this policy that was written by Mr. Pettimaj is a very good policy. First of all, we have to have something in place because, one, the pandemic was what forced this, but we also have to cover other issues. And I think Mr. Pettimaj, our county administrator, did a solid job on this. The only thing that I would like everybody to consider is when it goes through the supervisor director for request to put a person outside the building to work from home, that they make sure that they're following through. And if there's not anything, they're not following through, to let them know what the employee's doing by the workload, about the amount they got, which that's to be determined by the supervisor or director, that they pull them back in because they're not doing enough at home to keep I'm looking at customer service is what I'm trying to say, gentlemen, ladies, is, we're big on that right now, and that's the way we need to move forth. To hear that we had a department that couldn't get through, and some people got upset, they couldn't get their permitting or whatever it was, get in their buildings because the person wasn't answering the phone. It behooves us that there should be a backup system for this. And I've always said, pre-plan the plan and have a backup for the plan. And so the plan should have, if the person that gets the call, doesn't answer, there's another caller that it can go to until it finally gets to the administrator, if that's the last person that has to get the call to make a decision. It shouldn't sit there and just die with that one call, is what I'm trying to say. So if there's something we can tweak that to get this in this policy and make it stronger, it's a great policy, don't get me wrong. But to me, it's just got a small I don't want to call it a mistake or a flag or anything. It's just, I just see something that needs to be tweaked. And having said that, any commissioners' questions? Commissioner Sweeney.
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. Mr. Quayler, my discussion with you a couple weeks ago, you stated that out of 304 employees, 169 cannot work from home. So we're looking at the Register of Wills office, the deeds office, paramedics, anybody in the wastewater treatment plant. What others? IT can't work from home. It's very hard for IT to work from home in an environment where they're trying to support employees who are here sitting at their computer. So this, of the 304 employees, 135 can work from home, and 11 of those are elected officials. That makes 124. So you're looking at 42% of the total employees that are not elected can work from home. So we're putting a policy together that's only going to impact 42% of our workers, and 58% of our workers can't use it. That's not fair. It's not fair because you're going to put the impetus to be customer service oriented on those 169 employees that have to stay here and sit and answer the phones or greet people at the doors or at their counters. It's just not fair. So I'm opposed to it and won't vote for it.
Anybody else? Commissioner Hall, President Pepper.
Hi, thanks, Commissioner Angel. I just wanted to say a few words because I received a number of emails from various staff members with their concerns and complaints. And I think the policy addresses the complaints that I heard in terms of, if you have folks that aren't coming through doing what they should. I mean, we have the paragraph in there that talks about complaints and concerns. And in terms of, many of them seem to focus on the fairness issue. But in my view, this isn't an extension of a COVID policy. This should be a policy we should have had for a long time now. I've worked at the federal, state, local level. All of those have had telecommuting policies now going back into the 90s. As soon as, networking technology was available, people were moved out into authorized remote work conditions. So to me, this is just bringing us into the 21st century. And if it can't be applied to everyone, I don't see that as necessarily a drawback that, should not let us move forward on this policy.
President Pepper.
So Commissioner Sweeney, just for clarification, during the time of pandemic, you think everybody should just come back to work and work?
During the time of pandemic, that was emergency. We've had 2 pandemics in 100 years, 100 years apart. I don't think we're going to have another pandemic in the next 30 years for us to have to worry about. And in 30 years, we're all going to be sitting at desks with VR systems around us anyway. So Mr. Quayler, to that point, how many employees continued to come to work to the building during the pandemic?
I would say certainly all of your managers did, and a fair number of others, but we also had a good number of employees in particular in this building stay home.
But there were still employees that came, either because they wanted to or because they had to.
Either had to or wanted to, preferred it, yes.
And those employees that had to, like wastewater treatment plant guys and gals and paramedics, not going to be able to work from home.
They were essential employees and they came to work every day.
But there were also employees who are not essential employees who came to work every day.
They did, yes.
And did not receive any benefit from coming to work every day like the paramedics and the workers from the treatment plant did.
That's probably a true statement, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Masson.
Coming from a worldwide customer service environment where we had telecommute on a worldwide basis, wasn't because of a pandemic, but it could have been because of a snowstorm or issues, whether it be Holland, Singapore, whatever. the team never missed a beat in terms of being able to supply customer service. We had phones set up where the phones would roll, whether they rolled from Wilmington to Bally to Juarez, wherever. Technology is out there that allows you to do that. For any telecommuting to be successful, your directors, supervisor, et cetera, have to be mindful of where their employees are, what the workloads they have, what the timeliness is of the work, and be mindful of any complaints where phones aren't answered or work is not done. If you don't have management in place that's willing to step up to the plate to follow this policy, I don't care who you are, telecommuting will not work. It only works if you've got the right caliber people in the right places who aren't afraid to make the tough decisions and rein in employees who are violating the rules of the plan. And sadly, it only takes one or two people that can ruin this policy. Personally, I support telecommute. I had the first group in Hercules worldwide that did telecommuting, and it worked beautifully. But you have to ride herd over the responsibilities that you've given to the individuals. You have to track your metrics, and you have to be able to tell the employee, you're done, you're coming into the building to work, you violated the program. If they don't want to do that, fine, they need to find a job elsewhere. But you have to have the guidelines in place, and you have to be firm about it. Otherwise, it will not work. But personally, I support telecommuting, and I support this program here because I think it's badly needed.
And Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Commissioner Angel. And I understand all the concerns, right? I got the emails too. I think that we need a policy of sorts that's going to adapt to the reality that things changed a little bit, and presented it to the county during the COVID issue. The first one I look at is the launch from home, and potentially I'm guilty of that slogan, I would suggest. But I think that's an effective tool, and it is effective for only a slim section of employees. It just is. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's not about fairness, it's about efficiency. I'll give you the example. We had a conversation earlier about inspections. If they can effectively map out their day by starting at their house and working their way up, and I can add 2 more inspections per day because of that, that's a good thing. But it has to be managed. So that the launch from home thing I like, hopefully, and I've talked to some of the folks who express concerns, and I would suggest that there are more than just them that have the concerns. So just because I talked to a couple of them doesn't mean there's not more out there. So if they're listening, from what I heard, the launch from home made sense within reason. I think I heard that it makes sense to work from home during unique situations, potential weather event or other illness. I don't know, not the specifics, but they can be defined or managed. So I think that thing passes the test also. I'll end with this one. This is the third part. This is where I feel like I've learned that it's getting hung up. It makes sense to say in a large corporation that's spread out throughout the entire region that telecommuting is effective. It is. However, in a small community like the county, where perception somewhat matters, we have to be careful with that one. I think it needs to be utilized effectively and for obvious reasons, not just utilized because you can, because that has a diminished impact on current employees that are coming. So I don't know if we necessarily want to fall towards the just because we can today. It needs to be effective. It doesn't have to necessarily be, I'd love to say it's fair. It won't ever be fair. It needs to be effective. It shouldn't be just because we can. The idea is we want people in here. That's the ultimate goal. We want our employees back. However, we have an avenue if there is the situation where they stay home, but we always want them back. And then the last one is the one that's probably hanging out there the most. The COVID fog. And I live it every day as an educator who went in August. And half the staff did not. It is what it is. However, I went back in November, January, March. It got to the point where the school board, the district, finally set a mandate. you're coming back, or you're going on FMLA, or you're doing something other, because you're coming back. That's what you have to do. My question to you is, are we at that position in the county? Is that apples to apples? Mr. Pettit-Demas, Mr. Quayla? Did you hear what I know I like to talk a little bit. Sometimes I lose you. I clearly lose you guys. It is what it is. Are we in a position to mandate that all employees are now back in the building where they're utilizing other? Was it the family medical leave or something like that? Something that requires them to come back. Or are they still able to be COVID out for whatever? That appears to be a hanger right now from the folks that I've talked to. And I get it. They may be wrong, but I get it. I see it in the school district with the teachers I talk to. I have no idea who's out, but I get it when I talk to somebody at lunch and they're like, yeah, so-and-so or whatever is still out. And why?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Right now, we don't have a policy, so this is a first. We have a protocol that we had developed in December because of the outcry that occurred from employees and some commissioners after the surge that occurred after Thanksgiving, if you recall correctly. That's what happened. So we quickly developed we adapted a policy to enable people and departments to request remote work. And 3 departments did. And to date, there's just 1 department that still has some folks on remote work. And there are various reasons. Range from someone was recently told that they were in the presence of someone else who was positive, to someone who had COVID and is still kind of concerned about coming back. And there's a few in between. The interim or the protocol we developed, a lot of it is in this policy now that would require anyone that's on this program that they alternate days. They come in at least 2 days a week. It's no more than 50% of an office can vacate and that sort of thing. It's all in this policy now. I would like to address some of the other things that were brought up. Telework, the very name, telework, telecommuting, what's that suggest? Telephone, email, internet. Only those jobs who can telework can telework. It's really, from my perspective, not a matter of fairness. It's a matter of the type of work you do. And this is more about continuity of business, because just like we did not see a pandemic coming, there could be some other kind of disaster, calamity, whatever it might be, that causes people not to be able to come to their normal workplace. And those people who are able to telework because their work is primarily in front of a computer, on a phone, using email, using the internet, the expectation would be that they stay productive so that we can maintain our business continuity. We can continue to function as an organization. And in the organization, there are some jobs that cannot do their job unless they're on location. So, facilities management, for example, if there's martial law, you're not allowed to travel, those folks can't work. But people who deal with all the other aspects of business that we deal with, if they're equipped, they can work, as long as we still have internet service and that sort of thing. So I would urge you to view it in those terms. It's really more about business continuity than creating some unfair scenario for people. Experience is a great teacher. We learned a lot through this pandemic. We learned a lot about what we can do. We learned some things that didn't work too well. I think we learned just this week maybe some choices of people who are on, or positions of people who are on remote work probably aren't the best choices. When you have the primary person who's responsible for answering the phone trying to do business from a cell phone that only has one line on it, That doesn't work for a receptionist who's normally used to having 3 or 4 lines sitting on their desk, and they can put people on hold and they can do all that kind of thing. So you have to look at who's the right candidate for that work. And from day one, I told you, I think I told most of you that in this culture, we have this issue of fairness, and it's not fair if I have to work and someone else I know is not able to work because it's kind of viewed as a day off. That is, I think, the issue we have to get over if we're going to have this business continuity aspect of it prevail. A lot of the holes that have been talked about are plugged in this policy. And there's a section here that talks about, the standards that must be maintained if someone is telecommuting. And one of them is that their telecommuting does not cause any internal or external customer distress. You got to treat your external customers just like your internal customers. You can't ignore phone calls. You can't do that sort of thing. And the supervisor needs to be able to manage the employees remotely and know what's going on and what's not going on. So I think I heard some of those themes come through tonight in the discussion. So I think the choices of who would be put on this type of work and for how long are really where some of the commentary that you received over the past 24 hours lie, and not that this policy is bad as a document or as a guiding principle for the county, but there may have been some learning curve choices that we needed to adjust with this situation. So I think I'll stop there. I probably deviated way off of your initial question, but that's kind of the way I view this policy.
I won't beleaguer it. I appreciate you putting it together. I tried to end with, I support what we're doing. I think this policy does a lot of that. I tried to end with, I don't think this policy cures what's in the county right now as an issue. I have no idea, I truly don't, if 20 people are all working remote, or if 2 people are. I don't know. It's not my business, but it appears like it does at the school, where I don't have a clue how many are actually still working from home, although I know that there was an edict sent out. You got to come back. That was my question. Are we in a position to make sure if there's 10 people that are still at home that it's a valid like it is at the hospital, like it is at the school, like it is in other walks of life in the county, that there is a mandate that they're there. Yeah, I'm rambling now. But so, Mr. Quayle, did he answer the question? And we're good?
I thought the county administrator did an outstanding job explaining the genesis of it, the need for it, and the value of the proposed policy.
Commissioner Howe?
Yes, not too long ago, I made a transaction with the credit union, and I was talking with this lady, and I said, "What branch are you at?" And she said, "Well, I'm in Alaska." I mean, there's no question that lots and lots and lots of things could be done in the ways you're talking about. But I guess my issue is, or my question is it implied here that this policy is to be instituted only for the COVID situation, and when everything is normal and we're sitting here without our masks, this really kind of falls by the wayside? Or is this like a policy forever and ever? I'm in.
It's a policy. So it's not really COVID related. As explained earlier, telework is become commonplace in workplaces, and this would formalize it in the county with very strict rules that are included and approval processes. Every person that is assigned remote work has to be approved by the county administrator. So it gets top approval. So it's only going to be people who can demonstrate success and have a position where it can be successful.
Okay, thank you. I'll just remind everybody that the supervisors are responsible to make sure that the employees cut the mustard. Okay, so have there been any reported infractions where, Joe should be doing something on the computer or something, but he's out fishing instead? Or, do you know of anything that's happened like that, where somebody took advantage of this idea?
I'm not aware of anything that's been substantiated.
Okay, good enough. If you don't know of anything, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's happened. That's it for me.
To answer your question about the policy, Commissioner Howell, I see this more as a disaster policy for anything that could happen. We just went through a tornado not too long ago, not far from here. What happened if it hit this building? When I first became a commissioner, the biggest concern was a plane hitting this building. So it's not just the COVID. The COVID is what triggered it. So we need a policy in place to cover. If we could read the crystal ball, we'd all be millionaires winning the lottery. So we're not, but we have to be thinking ahead, outside that box, to be prepared. Accountability, responsibility, customer service, keeping this local government running, and no matter what dire strait we're in, is what we've been doing. We didn't shut down. We kept moving forth during this whole time frame. Now, unlike the city of Dover, they had to cut back their hours to pay your bills, your electric bill, certain days and times because of their staff. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, because while they were doing that, they were putting other things in place for putting walls up, getting the barriers put in place so they could get opened up again. They weren't just sitting around doing nothing. That's what I'm trying to say. But they had to do what they had to do in order to make their government work. And I think we did what Mr. Pettimaz put in place for us, an outstanding job, because we never shut down. We're still moving forth. The biggest thing, like I said, is this policy is for something we have no idea what's going to happen. It's there for when it does happen, we can move forth. Commissioner Sweeney.
Thanks. So, Mr. Quayle, I've got reports of people who are supposed to be teleworking, but they're out in public places doing things. Who would investigate that?
So if there have been such reports, they haven't reported them to the personnel office. Perhaps they just saw it and kept it to themselves. I've not received any reports like that.
So, Mr. Pettimaz, is that included in this policy, that it should be reported up to the personnel office?
It's in Section E, complaints and concerns say that complaints alleging a violation of this policy must be directed to the department head. Upon receipt of the complaint, the department head and the personnel director shall determine the appropriate course of action to resolve the issue. And that can go everything from a verbal to a written to a termination, depending on the severity of the infraction. So it's in the policy, and it's made clear here.
But that did not exist in the protocol that we put in last year.
No, I don't believe we had that in the protocol per
Yes,
se.
I don't believe we had any disciplinary types in there, but obviously employees have an obligation to work, and anytime they don't work, there should be a consequence.
So can any violations like that, I get the violations. I'm supposed to be teleworking and I'm out, I go fishing out on a headboat and someone sees me. I can see that. But if I'm supposed to put out 3 permit evaluations a day and now I'm doing 1 at home, is that not a reason for some kind of intervention by the head of the department to investigate why their performance has dropped off so much?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
And does that qualify as a complaint in that last paragraph of
Well, the complaint would be somebody
else catching them?
If we had this policy in place, those emails that you received over the weekend or whenever you got them weren't following the policy, because they should have been directed to the department head, not to commissioners. Okay? And under this policy, that's what should have happened. If this policy was in place, those employees that had a gripe should have contacted Sarah Kiefer and told her, hey, I'm getting these phone calls that don't belong to me, and they're complaining about people in your office not answering the telephone. I talked to Sarah this morning. She knew nothing about those complaints, she told me, until I showed them to her. So I want to get that out there too. But people need to follow the policies. If a department head who's responsible for their department observes that someone on telecommute is not being productive, it's their job to intervene and say, what's the problem? You know, you're not being productive. And if they perceive that it's because they're just not being productive, they need to adjust that and bring them in, or do something else. You know, other forms of discipline. I think there's a couple different places where discipline is referenced in this document for non-performance, but the expectation of this is that the job continues, and it continues in a satisfactory manner, whether you're telecommuting or whether you're in person in the building. So that's an overriding
So as a
concept.
supervisor of 60 employees, I can tell you over the last year, I've done a lot of teleworking myself and all my employees. But I've also followed up with them to make sure that they were still producing employees. It's not, I want to report from you every hour what you did for the last hour, how many phone calls you took, how many you made, but we're also in a position where we had no staff in the schools either that we had to work on any computers. So I had them doing other work, busy work that kept them busy so they could continue to get paid and we didn't have to get laid off. I just want to make sure, and I can vote for this if you guys are going to commit that that policy is going to get followed and that those directors who may not be inclined to follow up with their employees and make sure that they're producing, they're going to get coached in this as well. That's all I'm looking for, and I'd be okay with this. Thanks.
Anybody else? Seeing nobody? Mr. Petimage, anything else, sir?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Angel, this item is, requires levy court action. It does not require a public hearing. It could be a consent agenda item, or it could be a new business item, whichever the levy court prefers. But it does not require any kind of public notice or public hearing, so just wanted to let you know that. Other than that, I think, unless Alan has something more, I think we're through.
Mr. Quayle? What about the idea of like I said, it's not a flaw or a crack or a flag, but what I brought up earlier about, how do we discipline somebody that doesn't do what they're supposed to do? As for a manager or a director not following through to do something and know what their employees do, there should be a consequence for not. That's part of their job, is following the employee. So I'm not saying this has got to be something that's negative, but it doesn't address it either, that we need to. So I think we need to look at that everybody knows what their job is and how they're supposed to handle it. So at least in all my years around administrations, there's always been, if you don't do this will happen to you, or this could happen, other than, like you said, a reprimand or whatever. But I just want to know, is that something we need to tweak a little bit better in here still?
If I may, I think that it's covered, and we have the disciplinary tools we have. But under Section C, Item 1, employee responsibilities, the last sentence there says, violations may result in exclusion from telecommuting and or disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. I don't know how much stronger we can state that, but we have to live it. Yeah, you understand? I mean, we can put it in words and put it in writing, but if we don't follow it, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So we've got a lot of things like that where, unless you enforce it, doesn't matter.
Okay. Like I said, it's a great document, and because you wrote it, I'm sure you knew that answer before I even said it. So, but just wanted to get it out there so we had a good, healthy discussion on it. Commissioner Howell.
No, I was just going to agree with you. That's what I was doing. But I agree, that was well written. if a person is derelict, it's working at home or whatever, there are already rules in place to deal with that. Because when you get right down to it, letting them work at home doesn't mean they don't have to do what the job description says. It's as though they're here, right? Same thing.
Well, I know I would never ask an employee to do something that I wouldn't do first. I mean, I have my standards too, and I would hope everybody would have the same standard. Because if you don't, then we have a bigger problem. So, having said that, move this forth to the business meeting. Consent? 7 up. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Quayla, Mr. Pettimaj. Stormwater Management Funds, Mr. Pettimaj.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Angel. We received correspondence from the director at the Kent Conservation District, Mr. Tim Riley, recently. It was directed to President Pepper and copied to me, and it had to do with an awareness of the unexpended funds that we've been carrying in our budget for several years for stormwater management. And you'll recall that for many years we did appropriate money every year to assist with ditch maintenance work that the Conservation District does. And the way it used to work was that the district would come before Levy Court some point in the year and request funding to help round out their overall funding for various projects. And so ours was somewhat of an augmentation to their program. However, we ended up, that program kind of became self-sustaining at the district. And so we ended up with a balance of $199,410 in our budget. And in the correspondence from Mr. Riley, excuse me, he's asking for repurposing that money to assist in hiring part-time staff to help with drainage calls, I'm losing my voice here, site visits, and also other drainage issues that they deal with. And so I talked it over with President Pepper, and we thought it was appropriate to bring this forward to you now. There was some sense of urgency in Mr. Riley's correspondence. It sounds like we've had a lot of rain this year. It's been a great year for drainage calls for their office, and they're somewhat, no pun intended, but they're inundated with issues. And so we thought that it was important to bring it forward quickly. There's a motion provided to you if you consider favorably this request, and that would enable that balance of $199,400 to be repurposed for utilization of funding for additional staff to respond to drainage inquiries, site investigations, and drainage solutions in Kent County, and directed to the Conservation District for that purpose. So that's basically an explanation. I'll turn the floor back to you, Mr. Chairman.
President Bannon and Commissioner Sweeney. Oh my goodness. Just look to my right thinking of President Bannon, but President Pepper.
Okay. As you all know, I represent the Levy Court on the Kent Conservation District Board of Supervisors, and they have a money flow problem because the jobs have not been coming in to fund positions there. And as we all know, there one employee, Jared Atkins, we spread him really thin on all the calls that we get for drainage calls and flooding and so on and so forth. They were working towards that. They would like to have hired somebody, but the funds just didn't justify them hiring anyone. So when I had a conversation with Mr. Buxton about this, and I brought it up at the month before last Conservation District meeting, that we had these funds sitting in this this fund was just sitting there that hadn't been used. We used part of it a few years back to seed the stormwater pond thing for the communities, and but now we had $199,410 that's just sitting there, and it didn't make any sense since we know that it's for stormwater management, and if we had funded someone for the conservation district to be able to go out and inspect and help figure out what to do with some of these flooding issues and stormwater issues and that we have, then Mr. Atkins, he could stay in his office and get his job done and make the whole thing flow even better. So I suggested to them that look into using these funds and determine what they need to catch them up and what they would need to help us out when we get calls from constituents from flooding and so on and so forth. And that this is what they came up with, to hire a part-time person to start with and maybe work them into full-time. But by the time these funds are expended, by then the district's cash flow would be better, and they'd be able to keep that person on. And now, right now, as of last week, in Kent County, we're no longer 5 to 6 foot above normal groundwater level, but we are 3 to 4 feet above. So right now we're in a little bit of a dry period, but if this is anything like last year, that's not going to last. So this will be very timely if they get someone in to answer all these calls and take a load off of our backs. And because if your phone's like mine, it's just full of complaints dealing with this. So I think if we can help them out and let them use these funds, since they no longer use these funds for what they were originally intended for, I think it would be a big help to the whole county. And I think our constituents would be appreciative of it as well.
Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Pepper, where do they get their money from other than natural resources and Kent County? What other revenue generating do they have that they're missing out on?
Inspection fees and things like that along those natures. Back during the wintertime, things slowed down where they couldn't inspect because everything was so wet. And they get very few federal funds, but they do get some state funds, and that's about it. I mean, there's not a big cash flow like everybody would think.
But they do have a plan that if we give them this money and they hire people, they'll be able to continue, because I'm all in favor of KCD getting more people, because that it has been a huge issue with, I know in every one of our districts, and especially your district, since you're so much different than the rest of us. So, okay.
I think it's a perfect plan, and
Very much in favor of this. Just want to make sure they're not hiring somebody for a year and then after a year, county cut off your money, you're gone. So
that's not the plan.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Howe?
Now, we appropriate money every year, do we not? Didn't we used to give them $75,000 a year? Weren't we required by the state? Is that still the policy? Okay. But the money that we appropriated has just been sitting there? They didn't need it? Is that? The money that we appropriated, it has been sitting there, and we didn't ever.
This money has been sitting there for several years. They used to, how this used to work was they would get matching funds from the state, which they no longer get.
Right.
And they would come in here and small projects, they would whittle away from this fund and match it with the state funds to do small projects. But that's not the case anymore because the matching funds aren't there, and this amount here might do one job. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Yes, they definitely need the extra money because I've been talking with them too. I have a major issue with a major sinkhole in Cheswalt right off the road there with a building. And then did another sinkhole for Mr. Buxton's district because the people that knew me from my wife's Bible study called me, and I called Sarah, and she was able to get started working on it because they have an HOA. So because of the things that they're doing above and beyond, they need the extra money too. If you remember correctly, when we did our budget, when we had a downsize, we had to cut their budget. I think from, what was it, 100,000 to 75,000, Mr. Petitmage? For how many years? 4? 5? So that put a little bit of a drain on them because we know rain and water and those things didn't stop. So they got further and further backed up. So I'm glad to see they're finally looking to get somebody else in there. And I hope they get more than 1 or 2 people because they definitely need it. They're always understaffed in my eyes for what they're doing. So anyway, any other comments, gentlemen, ladies? Move it forth on the business meeting.
Mr. Angel.
Mr. Buck?
Mr. Angel, real quick, I support it. Just stating that very clearly. In fact, speaking of rain, when I removed myself from the discussion because I was having difficulty shutting the heck up and walked out in the hallway, man, it was pouring out there, so it might be back up to 7 feet, I'm afraid, and you might need a boat to get home. And I'm going to take that opportunity to use 30 more seconds in speaking about what I left on. I'm not talking about it. I lost. Bottom line, I tried to convince you to take it in a different direction. We're talking about the police. I lost. No worries. Discussion. I assume it's moved forward. It'll go on to an agenda next week, something like that. The fact that I lost in committee is what it is. The fact that I will support it when it ends up on the agenda is what it is. Because I do support the police, and I do believe in the funding that helps them. I just had a different path that I wished we'd take. It is what it is. So I just wanted that for the record. The reason I wasn't here for the vote, I couldn't convince myself to stop talking, so I figured I'd better just leave. Thank you.
Any further comments? Move it forth in the business meeting. 7 up. Thank you. Consent, yes. Any public comments? Any public comments? Anybody online, Mark?
If we have any individuals who wish to address Levy Court on either of the matters that were discussed in the Administration Committee, press *3 on your computer to raise your electronic hand, *6 to unmute your mobile device.
Mr. Riley, you may proceed at this time.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
No, can you speak up, please?
Okay. So I just wanted to let you all know I am online. I've heard your discussion. And
State your
if you had
name.
any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Tim Riley,
Oh.
District Coordinator of Kent Conservation.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm here to answer any questions you may have and clarify any of that discussion you just had. I heard it all. If you need me to clarify anything, I'm certainly here and willing and welcome to do that.
Tim, how many people are you looking at trying to hire?
Right now, our stormwater has picked back up, so we're going to be able to hire another stormwater inspector through the stormwater program. So we're looking to hire one person to really handle these drainage calls that aren't specific to a tax ditch or specific to another program. The ones that really you all have been dealing with a lot. I know Jerry Pepper has, Commissioner Buxton has, and Commissioner Angel. I know you all have been dealing with these. So, and Commissioner Maston. So that's what we're really looking to try to handle right now. Because don't get me wrong, our stormwater inspectors will still handle drainage calls if it's in a development that they're going to be going to inspect anyway. So we're looking to get one person that will help us spread this across many staff. It's just right now, on a normal year, we can't keep up with it because there's just so many more communities now. And, we all know that we have people that have come from other parts of the country where they have a higher level of service because they paid the higher taxes for it. And so they're expecting a different level of service than what we can provide. And so that obviously is eating into staff. and time with staff. And I heard it mentioned earlier, Jared initially gets the first discussion from any landowner, typically goes to Jared, and then he has to deal with it, and then he might assign it to somebody, but there went 30 minutes of Jared's time, and when you add that up on a daily basis, it's just too much. And that's not just Jared. There's a number of people that have to deal with it. This is just that he's the manager of the program, so he's the one that is the face of it. That's a long-winded answer to tell you, one, just to try to help spread this out, free up some of our other staff to do their own job and pick pieces of this continuum of the drainage goals.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else?
And and then I'll just clarify on the reason that your fund is there as it is now. Prior to the 21st Century funds that the state of Delaware received to do these public ditching projects, there was no pot of money other than what the state would give. And then we would use your money to match their money to do projects. And then once the 21st Century Fund came at the state level, it was a big number, and we no longer needed to match. The state no longer put the $100,000 aside that they mandated every dollar they put aside, however many the county would match, they would match up to $100,000. That's where this pot you have came from. We didn't need it anymore for matching because of the 21st Century Fund. And we utilize now the 21st Century Fund and typically CTF funding or tax ditch funding or some other funding pots to match on those projects that the 21st Century pays typically 90% for the project cost. And as Commissioner Pepper said, the dollar amounts are pretty high on a lot of these projects. And so there are the occasional projects now that could be done a lot quicker if we had a little pot of money, and that's what I referenced in my letter, where we could just knock this project off if we had something that didn't have a lot of red tape tied to it and be able to do it. But we can address those as they come up and talk them more specifically if that's the route we want to go with that.
Thank you, Tim. Any further questions for Tim? Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? Anybody else online, Mike?
Do we have any other on the call?
There are no more participants at this time.
Thank you, Mark.
Seeing nothing, back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Last item on the agenda, Public Safety Committee, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked Chief Faulkner to come down and talk about the recommended program.
Thank you, Commissioners. Before I get started, because I did reference a couple of times in this memorandum about hiring Delawareans, that does not imply that we don't get excellent employees from out of state. In fact, their EMS division, the top two employees over there, one's from Ohio and the other one's from New Jersey, of all places. So we do get, I just want to clarify that because it could be misinterpreted in the memorandum. However, as the commissioners know, we've been challenged with hiring paramedics in a timely fashion for some time in the Delaware paramedic system, not just us, but the other two counties as well. The only resource for us for paramedics in Delaware is Delaware Technical and Community College. This is the only training institution in the state that grinds out paramedics for us. They admitted, in their last class, they admitted 12, only 8 to 9 of those students will make it to the field. And so the competition for these students are typically aggressive among the counties. So it's a supply and demand issue for us. The supply does not meet the demand. It has not for some time. And it's demonstrated by, actually it was 7 vacancies when I wrote the memorandum. It's now 6. We had boomerang effect. One of our medics came back that had left, so we're happy about that. But our system is matured. It's now over 30 years old, and you can expect retirements every year, and not just retirements. Sometimes people leave for other reasons, but it just compounds the challenges that we have in trying to fill the vacancies. And again, it's not just in Kent County, it's in the other 2 states. And I can say that Last week, I was supposed to interview an excellent candidate for our system. His employer found out that he was thinking of leaving, and I don't know what the deal was, but they offered him something that he couldn't refuse, and we lost that person. I know a couple years ago or so, we had an opportunity for one of the Christiana Care helicopter folks, and we didn't offer them enough, so they didn't come. But this is challenging for us in management and trying to cover the shifts, and it's certainly challenging for the field staff who have to work all those hours. Our vacant positions, if our floats are committed, typically have to be filled with overtime. And the typical overtime shift for our paramedics, if they work a full shift, is 24 hours. If they work a triple, and we know it's been done, it's 36 hours, at least 36 hours. We enhance their operations to accommodate these long hours. We give the paramedics who are kind of stuck working an opportunity to farm out to a slower station. We do have, bunk facilities, and, we try to work with them. The supervisor's supposed to have a good look at them, see if they're fit for duty to work that long, and we do the best we can under the situation, but it's just, to me, it's a bit unhealthy. So, our efforts to catalyze our hiring process to increase our success is really, it's been sluggish at best. We've had some good success with aggressive social media blitzes. Some of the things we've done is we met with Delaware Tech students to promote and encourage interest in our county. Also met with paramedic programs in other states via Zoom to promote the county as well. We've conducted mass mailings to educational facilities, and we've participated in multiple job fairs in various high schools and colleges as well. And we have consulted with their fellow paramedic agencies as well. And some of the mass, the nationwide advertisements in trade journals are typically unsuccessful. You just pay a lot of money for them, and you don't really get much in return. We have a unique program in Delaware. It's an aggressive advanced life support system. If you're successful in Pennsylvania, you may not be successful here, and that's one of the challenges. It's very aggressive, but it's also, in my opinion, the best in the United States. We continue to be challenged. As I mentioned, I know that Newcastle County a few years ago, they established a relationship with Good Fellowship Hospital. They hire candidates like for a police or fire academy would. They pay them a salary, they put them through school, and they draft them back into their agency. They've been doing this for some time with a high degree of success, actually. We've discussed and enhanced and tinkered with their process for trying to get folks to come to us for some time. And some of the folks from out of state, while we do get good candidates, some of them leave us to go back home. It's just a reality of it, of the situation. We have proposed two possible solutions, or two possible enhancements that's detailed on your memo. And one of those, if the commissioners recall, a few years back, we would pick up a candidate in the second year of their paramedic program. Typically, a paramedic has an associate's degree. And we would hire someone who was already engaged in the program, hire them like a year before they graduate. We have the ability to orient them to the county and to our way of doing business. We would propose that as an option for maybe 2 students, and not necessarily restrict it to Delaware Tech, as there are some other junior colleges, one over in Maryland, and I wouldn't rule out Good Fellowship in Pennsylvania either. But just as a way to get our hooks into a candidate and draft them back. I can count the times on probably one hand that we've been fully staffed since I've been chief of the department. We get fully staffed. We're fully staffed for a few weeks, and then someone leaves. So we always have the openings, and we would always be able to accommodate the 2 folks that we have in school. And of course, at the current pay grade, which is pay grade 7, that's detailed in the memorandum. If the commissioners wanted to consider this, we would request that the 2 candidates be considered. The other option that we toyed with and think it's a good idea too is a possibility of a hiring bonus. People do it. Agencies were, they're challenged with hiring candidates in an aggressive workforce. They provide bonuses. I mean, I noticed when I walked in Wawa the other day, they were providing bonuses for employees. I know Bay Health pays people to go to school. It's kind of like a new reality to capture a field of good quality personnel that's going to represent your organization well. And that's where we're at. What we're doing is just not working. If it was working, we wouldn't have, the 6 openings that we currently have. And again, my concern is individuals working long hours becomes a liability. The interns don't even do that anymore. Way back in the day, you'd hear about the intern working 28, 24s and 48s and stuff like that. They realized at some juncture along the way that was really unhealthy for not only the intern, but for the patients as well. And I think it challenges our quality assurance program when we have folks working that long in terms of time frames. But we thought that my goal for coming here tonight was to kind of explain to the commissioners what our challenges were with hiring. And provide a possible solutions. Unfortunately, I know every time I come here, I'm asking for money. Well, not every time, but we do think it's important enough that it warrants some conversation. Again, not all of our paramedics are able to work overtime, so our overtime field is limited to the group who really want to do it. A lot of our folks they're younger folks. They have families. They have babysitting issues, and so the overtime falls on really a confined group of folks. But it's and I've made this comment many times, not just here, but with the state of Delaware as well. It's just those long hours are unhealthy. I just think they're unhealthy and a liability.
Thanks, Chief. Before I get to the questions, it's a serious issue. These are 2 very good recommendations. And so, my full support. I did want to ask, in either of the enhancements, what would be the required commitment from, anyone that was getting a bonus or who was receiving a salary while they were in school? That is something that I think certainly we would want to reel them in and be able to retain them for a couple of 3 years. And I think with Mr. Eliason and Alan Quiel, our personnel director, we would develop a contract that would a really tight contract that clearly stated what it is, what our expectations were, and what the what the outcomes would be if the contract was violated. Okay, because like I said, I fully support these, but I would want to make sure that the county was covered so that if we made these investments, we would have some assurance that we would, have them on staff for a period of time.
Yes,
Commissioner Angel had a question.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Yes, Chief, many years ago we had a discussion exactly what's going to take place, and it's now happening. Now that it's happening, we have 2 paramedics for you that we have go through the college, correct, for the courses? Is that still in place?
It's not really. We haven't used that, but by the time we pick up the students, they've got a month left or a couple of months left, and it's that program I think is still in place. It hasn't been utilized.
What about enhancing it then? For example, when they become a paramedic, they pay for their year of courses. But when they graduate, we give them their first year back on their first year, their anniversary rate, their second year of course, and their third year, we bump their salary up 1 pay grade as an enhancement. Because we're still competing with Delcastle or Newcastle because they're higher pay out there. So by getting them down here and getting them in 3 years in place, is that another way of enhancing our program to try and get somebody here?
I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think it certainly is an option that can be considered. Pardon me? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner Angel. One of the things that we do is we're going to the high schools trying to recruit paramedics early. One of the things we do is we partner with Del Tech, and we introduce the SEED program. So for the students graduating from a Delaware high school, you get 2 years of the college that is paid for. And we're actually introducing them into the paramedic program. So for those students, it wouldn't be an incentive for them because their payment, they wouldn't get any tuition reimbursement because their school would be for free. And they become a paramedic for free. So the thought that we're looking to do is if we can get the students as employees early while they're in the program, then there's an ownership for them to Kent County. And we can start orienting them to the Kent County way so that when they graduate, their FTO process would be shorter than if they were a new hire. So it's actually a cost saving because we would be hiring the students at a lower pay grade than filling that spot with a pay grade 10. But then we would be guaranteed a full-time paramedic that we've trained over their summer in the field with us. So we're cutting that down also, the amount of time in their field.
We're still short. How many people are we short, Chief?
We currently are down 6.
6 people?
Yeah, I have one that I'm going to interview next week, and hopefully that'll bring us down to 5. But it's 5 is 5 for us is a big chunk of the department. Practically a quarter of our workforce is eligible to retire. So this really isn't going to go away. I like the idea of engaging the college students in the second years of their, paying them a salary, and I think that we can be successful with that if we have a tight enough contract and the expectations are out there. I think it's an opportunity to us, we can, alleviate the pressure from year to year by having students in the pike, so to speak, that we can draft into service when they get out of school and they're successful with their schooling. I think the bonus is a great idea too. Either way, I think I've never really come to Levy Court and with this kind of request before. We've developed programs through the budgeting process and things like that, but I think it's serious enough for abilities to provide a good response to our citizens to have the conversation tonight about how we can enhance their hiring process.
What about developing a contractual service for paramedics that have retired that would like to be on call, maybe to help out?
We could do that. We could. As long as they maintain their state license through the Board of Medical Practices, we could do that. We just don't really have any that want to do it. We may have 1 or 2. We actually had one of our paramedics retire, and her situation changed, and almost within 2 months she's back to us. That's why we're down from 7 to 6. But we were actually going to use her in that capacity until she decided to come back full time. So yeah, it's certainly a possibility that we would definitely welcome. One of the challenges with that is, for the paramedics, if you're only going to work, and we also have an organized labor group that can challenge those types of decisions, but if we're only going to use a person once a week or once a month, we worry about skill drop off, and So that's one of the things that we have to consider when we're using just, someone part-time. We want to make sure they're on point and that they're sharp all the time, and sometimes difficult to do that. We rotate our slow stations into Dover because Dover's so busy, so that their skills don't degrade. And we do that on a regular basis, constantly in motion, rotating through the central district where they're always busy. So.
Well, one of the reasons I thought of that was because when I was teaching, in order to get a sick day, you had to call in the day before to have a sub take your place. So that way your class could still maintain its educational value while you did your thing, even though you weren't sick. But that's the way the school system worked. Right. So you had to pre-plan your sickness in order to get a day off to do something. So that way, if a paramedic has a doctor's appointment or has something they have to do with the family on a certain day, that there could be somebody that called in to fill in at last moment like that. So that's why I was thinking of what I just said, a contractual service.
Right. We looked at trying to, because we are a statewide system, so we can work in Kent County, Newcastle, it's all the same. And we looked into offering up part-time opportunities at one time to the other two counties, but they have so much overtime opportunities available in their own counties, they don't need to come to us. They just, no one has any trouble getting overtime in this business. But the shifts are long that they work, and the work that they do is critical. And it's physical, and it's academic, and it's also carried out sometimes in extremely dangerous environments. And again, I keep coming back to the extended hours working, and I think it's challenging for the paramedics. I mean, when I say it's challenging to us as administration, it doesn't come near to how challenging it is for the guys out and girls out there that are actually doing the work. But I get pages all the time, mandatory hold, mandatory hold. So I know that somebody's not going home. They're going to be stuck at work, for lack of better terms. And it creates, I think it can create health and morale issues as well. We haven't really seen any evidence of that. Maybe, little micro things here and there that we try to resolve the best we can through flexibility and staffing and things of that nature. But I know we have inconvenienced staff because of the inability to be able to provide replacement paramedics in a timely fashion.
Well, thank you, sir. I can't think of anything outside the box anymore. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Pepper?
Chief, curiosity's sake, I don't recall the numbers. Someone right out of, say, Del Tech, they've completed their training and they're hitting the streets. What's their salary?
$22.75 an hour. Thank you, John.
44 a year, plus then they get overtime on top of that.
There's built-in overtime to the shift because they basically work 48-hour runs, depending how it hits on, on the start of the week. Usually results in 8 hours of overtime, at least, built into the schedule per month.
The same person, if they didn't want to be a paramedic, they went to school and became a registered nurse. What do they come out making when they hit the floor?
A registered nurse, they're going to rank a little higher in salary, I think. To be honest, my wife's a retired nurse, actually, and I don't know the answer to that question. But I'm sorry. Okay, so John is a prior Bay Health employee. Says they start at $28 an hour. $28.
Yes, so they're starting off about $10,000, $12,000 more an hour or a year.
Yeah. They both typically, become, now I know Bay Health is moving towards baccalaureates, but reality of it is becoming an RN Delaware, you need 2 years of school. Same way for the paramedics. We do get some folks from like Good Hope as more of an diploma type program, but most of their paramedics coming to us have associate's degrees. They have degrees, and we have quite a few master's degrees out there too. So this is a highly educated group of folks, and they're motivated. And to me, they're worth. I hate to compare apples to oranges and stuff like that, which is what we sometimes do when we compare ourselves to other professions. But in the first responder realm, the paramedics are no less than anyone else when it comes to salary, in my opinion. I've been a first responder for a long time. And, I think we're all in the same business, but I don't think one is worth more than the other. So when we have these pay disparities among the groups and stuff, I've had staff leave to become nurses. They cross over. It's a bridge program that they have. I've lost a few, actually, that's bridged over. And they may have good reasons for it. Some people don't like working in the field. They don't like working in the environment that, and it's, like I say, it's not for everybody. It's a difficult job to do in the streets. But yet the challenges, still exist.
If, I'm trying to think along the lines of what the state does. People retire full-time and then they wait a period of time, then they come back, work casual, seasonal, and they're only allowed to work 29 hours per week. Since we're more than likely going to be heading into people wanting to retire because of the time they've had on there, do you think any of those that have not retired yet might consider retiring if they knew they could come back and work casual seasonal 29 hours a week?
I think there would be some interest in it. I do. We have folks that retire that didn't really retire. They just move on to something else. I think there would be that interest. Again, I'd have to defer to our attorney and Alan Quiella over the challenges with the contract that we have with our union group. But yeah, I do. In answer to your question, I think some would do that.
And 29 hours a week, that would probably be enough to keep their skills up.
That would do it. Yeah, that would do it.
And like you said, the only issue that I would see is, well, first off, you wouldn't have to pay them benefits because they're already collecting benefits. But it could be a potential union issue, whether they'd want to see that happen. But the other side of it is their people aren't held over for 2 or 3 shifts. So, it should be a safety issue to take a look at. And I like I was said, I hate to see all that institutional knowledge and medical knowledge walk out the door when someone retires and, they don't keep up their skills. They just let it go and they do something less meaningful to them and the community when they can come back and basically do the same thing and be like a part-time job for them and make a little bit better wage than what they'd make typically out there doing a part-time job. So I would like to look into that. If we look into it, if the county administrator and the attorney and Mr. Quiella, put their heads together, see if we could do something like that. And especially since we're starting, we could write some kind of policy or whatever, especially since we're getting ready right at the point where, like you said, half of your workforce could retire tomorrow. And, if they decided they want to retire, it'd be nice if they had the option to come back and put some hours in and, not only help themselves, but help the paramedics and help the county as well. So I think that's worth looking into, at least from the level I'm thinking of it right now anyhow.
Right.
So
we certainly would be happy to do that. Like I say, we were going to do it with our last retiree, but like I say, she came back and we're happy that she's back. I think if we can get a retiree that's young enough, I think they'll do it.
Mr. Pettit-Damage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colin, some years ago, the county did have this same program where we would pay the tuition for students. We would pick, arrangement with a student or two at Del Tech. But as I recall, the attrition rate was fairly high. In other words, they did not stay with us And I'm not suggesting that because of that we shouldn't do this again, but there needs to be I guess some kind of advanced screening to make sure that these students really are good prospects. And number two, some type of clawback provision if they graduate and 6 months in they decide this isn't for me, that we somehow get our money back. And the other thing is with the bonus, to me anyway, and this is just my thought, I think the bonus is more applicable to a seasoned paramedic that you're trying to lure in, who is ready to roll, than to someone who's not got any experience. I think that may give you a little bit more of a competitive edge if you're able to incentivize someone with experience to come work for you. But if you could just talk to the commissioners, I want to make sure the commissioners understand, we've been down this road to a certain extent previously, and it really didn't, a lot of those folks aren't with us anymore. They didn't stay.
No, they did not.
So,
the program was conceptually it was good. Maybe the contract wasn't tight enough that we had out there. And I want to say that the folks that did leave us, they were not, and again, it's no reflection on out-of-state folks, but they weren't Delaware folks. They left. They went back home. And to me, it was I was totally disillusioned at that, and basically abandoned the problem. I was the one that abandoned. I just didn't do it anymore. I felt it. It was too challenging. The way we were doing it. But I think you learn from those things, and I think we did learn a few things, and I think we can tighten it up, contractually. And we can look and go and talk to the other folks that are doing this type of program and see how they do it. I don't mind stealing a good idea and put that into practice into Kent County. So,
Commissioner Buxton.
A couple things. Clawback, yes. Got to figure out a way. My daughter's graduating from the University of Delaware this year. She had basically a scholarship her senior year, but she was required to work at the Milford School District while she was going to school. In fact, she just got hired, but in agreeing to that scholarship, she had to sign a contract that identified two things, that because she was paid $2,000 a month to do something similar. She was paid $2,000 even though she was a senior in college, to work at Milford School District while going to school. She had to sign a contract that if she bombed, she had to pay the money back. So there's language out there you might be able to steal or something like that. And she also is required at the end of that to agree to work in a needs school district for 3 years. Right. So the point is that I like the concept. I think there's a problem. I appreciate, you mentioned you come here a lot spending money. It costs a lot of money to do public works. I get it. This is one of those ones where we've got a problem. It's impacting our performance, and let's present some ideas. So I support this. I was presenting to you maybe some thoughts on how you get a clawback situation involved. I love the idea of maybe hiring back some old hats that can fill gaps. I don't know if that's possible, but it makes sense to me. What else? And I'll just throw this out there, job fairs, because I don't know what you do. But think outside the box if you aren't already doing that by attacking the 4-year. I think the problem we have with a lot of the graduates, they're graduating 4 years with a degree that really doesn't have a defined career path, so they're looking for something next. So you've got students who are graduating that understand the rigors of going to school and staying committed, who really don't have an identifiable path, or maybe are accessing a job field that's less than what you're offering. And maybe they would jump at that, and just because they're not in the medical field. Last one, athletic trainers. I was one of the first athletic trainers in the state of Delaware to be employed at a high school. I was a fully certified trainer back when they didn't know what trainers were. Now they're not a dime a dozen, but they're very common. The problem with an athletic trainer, they're highly qualified individuals that go through a lot of specific training, but their earning potential is not very high. So they come out of college kind of with shell shock. It would be nice to be able to run yourselves into those folks leaving Delaware, leaving other colleges that are in that career path, that are now being employed at physical therapy place, that have a shell shock. Because the key is, the problem with an athletic trainer is the same problem with you guys, no disrespect. A nurse, we can bill, insurance companies. You can't bill for athletic training services, so it's hard to pay them what they're actually worth. So that's about it. I'm just throwing out suggestions. I really want to make sure you understand this something. I appreciate you coming forward with some ideas, because I believe you are hurting being down 7, 6.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Angel?
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. A couple things just came to mind as I was listening to everybody talk. Commissioner President President Pepper. Yeah, I should look at you more. Anyway, he mentioned about having somebody retire and then, hire them back at 29 hours. Administration-wise, that to me would create a bigger hole, because you have, unless you have people to fill the need, you're going to have to come back, work 29 hours, whether you're working 40 plus overtime. So you're going to create a bigger hole that way, is the way I see it. But if you hire them and retire, they're retired now, as we're working to keep people there on a on-call basis, that would fill the loop temporarily.
That's what, we would imagine any part-time folks that we would use, and I think our work group would almost demand it would be to fill in those spots where we have a vacancy and no one wants to work it. It's worth a try if we can get it to happen. There's a lot of coordination for that to become a reality.
Well, the other thing that came up to mind too was a job fair for the county. And I'll direct this to Mr. Pettimaj too, because we have a large staff that's going to be retiring soon, looks like, possibly. And we could add the paramedics to the job fair for getting somebody to come in. So we have, replacement people that have an interest in looking at the county government for a job. That's another idea. Mr. Pettimaj?
If I could that's a very timely topic. The city of Dover just had a job fair at Shooty Park, and we participated in it. Unfortunately, our paramedic staff did not, and we had a free table offered to us, and we did not staff it, and that was a miss on our part. I know the personnel department was there to provide, they were there all day. We had people there all day, but I really wanted to get paramedics there because that's what we were most hurting for, and unfortunately we missed that opportunity. But we need to commit to that, and I think that's an important element. They had a lot of people. They had a really good turnout from what I heard. Mr. Queller was there for a period of time, and other members of his staff. I don't know if he wants to talk about it, but anyway.
Well, if it worked for Shooty Park, why can't we do it at our gym and do a county-wide one?
My point is, if we're going to do it, we better show up.
Well, I think our staff, to defend, my staff does a great job in trying to extend themselves out in the community. I'm not sure what happened with that job fair, to be quite frank with you. I have no idea what happened there, and I can find out, but I have no idea. I do know that staff goes to great trouble to try to attract candidates into the county. And, this is not a new thing for us. And, some of our folks, this type of work, you don't just necessarily show up at some of these fairs and attract folk who want. You may sink a hook and a bait, but a lot of our folks come from the fire service. All 3 chiefs in the state of Delaware started in the fire. I started in the fire service. Newcastle did in Sussex County. They all started in the fire service. And, we would think they would become a repository or a place for us to harvest potential candidates. And I think those things need to be explored. But a lot of those folks are out working. They have families. And the only way they're going to be able to do this is if they just, because if you're in a paramedic program, you're married to it for 2 years. It is not like any other college program. You are married to it for a full 2 years, and it's quite a commitment. And if we're going to attract those kind of folks, which is why I like the tuition thing, we can bring them into the fold, people who are already integrated into the system, that are firefighters, that are EMTs, and that have been out there a few years and watched the paramedics work, and hey, I'd like to do this. We've tried things, with a high school. I know Polytech had a program, but I don't think it's even there anymore. But the idea was, you and I were involved in that. You were highly involved in it, but they had trouble keeping instructors for that program. I think all the options, including the fairs, I think they're all good things to participate in. But I do think that we need to focus too on our most likely field of candidates, and I think some of those are folks that are perhaps already engaged somehow, maybe in high school, and I think the high schools are a really good idea because they haven't entered school yet. They may be looking for an idea on what to do. It's and I think the fire service would agree that they would like to see opportunities for their folks, to move up the line and become paramedics. It is a profession. It's a good profession. I've done it for a long time, and I found it, it's very rewarding. And I think other folks would find it as being rewarding as well. But all these options are good things, and we'll continue to do the things we do. We're not asking to, for, some funds to put somebody in school and we're going to sit back. The things that we're currently do, we'll continue to do. And so, I think the collaborative effort of all those things will produce good results, but it's not so far. And again, most of our staff will tell you that most of our success comes from aggressive social media. That's where we get our candidates. All the young people do the social media, Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all that kind of stuff. That's how they communicate. And a lot of our folks that come to us heard about us through some social media. And we do that all the time. If you follow our Facebook and Instagram, we're out there constantly. So we do a lot.
Chief, appreciate you bringing this to us. I'm going to ask for a show of hands for support here in a bit, but I think we may be in violent agreement here. And so we reached a point, I think, where just like your opinion, Mr. Pettit-Tomas' opinion, is this a case where we need an incentive policy with a range of options that we can pull the trigger on, and then take some time to explore the legal issues, contracting issues, union issues, so it's bulletproof, so we have a clawback, so it's airtight, so we, find candidates and we invest in them, we've got them for a period of time, and then we can take that policy and then fund it. It's a line item that we can point to and say, okay, we expect, X number of bonuses or X, hours of support for a year or X number of hours for retirees on the other end, and sort of guesstimate what that is, fund it, and then formalize this thing, and then maybe spend some time on that and come back at some point in the future for us to, formally move it forward. But is anyone here opposed to this? Is everyone in favor of sort of going down that road? Okay. So is this a policy, you think?
I think it's a program that we would develop and flesh out, and also come back with the program and a budget request to fund it. That's basically the way I would see it, and then it would become part of probably the public safety budget, be like an adjustment to the budget.
Okay, so unless there's any objections here, I think we move forward on that. So we're moving in the right direction. 'Cause, again,
Thank you.
coming back to this is a very serious issue for the citizens of the county and especially for us to manage and address. So appreciate you coming tonight, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Any other questions or comments for Chief Faulkner? Any public comments?
We have anyone online still? We still have one lone person on WebEx. If they'd like to address Levy Court on this matter, *3 on your computer, *6 will unmute your mobile device. Doesn't
All right.
appear that they wish to talk to us. So.
Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Executive session tonight at all?
No, sir.
Okay, no executive session. We are adjourned.
All right.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.com.
So did we talk about